Ron DeSantis spoke at the Museum of Tolerance in Jerusalem last week, and a reporter asked him about claims by a former Guantanamo Bay detainee that DeSantis had attended his force-feeding session. Now, DeSantis, who served as a legal advisor at Guantanamo in 2006, made some news with his response. He did not appreciate being asked about this, but, you're overseas, the foreign press, they're a little ballsier than the White House Correspondents' Dinner people are here. And so you might get a tough question.
They still have an independent press.
Exactly. So here's his response.
No, none of all that's BS. No, totally BS. Yep.
Say you were president.
Yep.
Is that
Who said that?
detainees?
How would they know me? Okay, think about that. Do you honestly believe that's credible? So this is 2006. I'm a junior officer. Do you honestly think that they would have remembered me from Adam? Of course not. They're just trying to get into the news because they know people like you will consume it because it fits your preordained narrative that you're trying to spin. Focus on the facts and stop worrying about narrative. Yes, sir.
I mean, he's a pro, but the premise of what he's saying is not really make sense. Like, if you tortured a motherfucker, he'd probably remember you. Like, that's the kind of thing you kind of
when you're sitting strapped to a chair in a diaper with them pouring Ensure down your fucking throat.
Right.
Yeah, you're going to remember the guy who was laughing behind the chain link fence if his story is accurate. Right. One thing I will point out here, though, two things I'll point out actually about the media coverage on this. First of all, the only part of this story they really covered was that, and they covered it very briefly because they couldn't really cover it without talking about what he was responding to, which implicates the military-industrial complex and their friends in the deep state. So they didn't really want to dwell on this story. This, they tried to spin it as DeSantis loses it with reporter in Israel. He didn't. And he was very in control. No Republican ever paid a price for going off on the press. That's a very old one in the Republican playbook. He did like the idea that he lost it. He didn't lose it. He was very in command of himself. But the other point I will make, building on that, when you look at DeSantis stories in the news, it's all about Disney. It's all culture war. It's all fighting about Disney. This shit, they're not touching. They're not touching because of who it implicates. Their buddy, George Bush. George Bush is their friend. He's Michelle's partner in crime. They don't want to talk about this. Yeah, and really, it's the most effective line of attack against DeSantis that they have if they want to undermine him with Republican voters, but not the torture part, but the military-industrial complex part.
Here's an article in Al Jazeera that details some of these claims that he was answering to there. So, Russell, do you want to?
Okay, yeah. So DeSantis was a JAG, and he was sent to interview these detainees, and they thought that he was sent to interview them about their treatment and their conditions and to litigate their guilt or innocence. Basically, they thought he was an advocate for them. So his contention, do you really think a junior JAG would be remembered? Sure. If this is the guy that you thought was going to help you out and then you saw him laughing behind a chain link fence later, sure, you'd remember him. Sure, you would. So, and this is another point. If you go to look up stories about this, it's very hard to find it in the mainstream press. This is why we're on an Al Jazeera article here. I was informed that the U.S. government was determined to break the hunger strike. The doctor in charge, a colonel, told me he did not care if I said I was innocent or protesting mistreatment. He was there for one thing, to make me eat. There was a mass hunger strike on Guantanamo. I refused and was immediately and violently strapped into the chair so tightly that I could not move. A nurse forced a thick tube into my nose and down my throat. My nose bled and the pain was so great that I thought my head would explode. The nurse would not stop. Instead, he began pouring Ensure into a feeder bag attached to the tube. They poured can after can in the feeder bag until my stomach and throat were so full that Ensure poured back out of my mouth and nose. I thought I was going to drown. If you throw up, a corpsman said, we'll start from the beginning with a new case and fill you up again. As I tried to break free, I noticed DeSantis's handsome face among the crowd at the other side of the chain link. He was watching me struggle. He was smiling and laughing with other officers as I screamed in pain. I threw up in their direction. They jumped back disgusted. I did not care. I was the only one there who had the right to be disgusted. All right, so this seems like a plausible story to me. It seems rather far-fetched that somebody who was held in Guantanamo would just single out Ron DeSantis for no reason. And we also, right from his own words, have reason to believe that this story is plausible. So we have some video of DeSantis. What was this, 3 years ago?
This was actually in 2018. This was an interview with CBS South Florida where he's asked about his role in Guantanamo Bay, and he actually brings up the issue of hunger strikes and how he recommended they might deal with them.
Experience there, and what exactly did you do while you were there?
Well, also, I'm a blue-collar kid, which a lot of people running for this office are millionaires, have inherited an awful lot of money.
This was during the
I didn't
campaign
get squat.
season.
I started off making
gubernatorial
$6 an hour. I was able, through baseball, to play at Yale and go to Harvard Law School. Then I decided to commission as a JAG officer in the U.S. Navy. I volunteered to serve in Gitmo. I was sent down there on temporary assignments, working for the Joint Task Force Guantanamo, which was in charge of dealing with these terrorists that were there.
So were you interviewing terrorists? Were you a legal advisor?
I was a legal advisor.
For those that were doing...
The things that would happen is, the thing you notice the day you get down there is, for these detainees, the jihad was still ongoing. Right. And they would wage jihad any way they can. Now, they're in a facility, so it's limited, but some of the things they would do hunger strikes, and you actually had 3 detainees that committed suicide with hunger strikes. So everything at that time was legal in nature one way or another. So the commander wants to know, well, how do I combat this? So one of the jobs of the legal advisor would be like, hey, you actually can force feed. Here's what you can do. Here's kind of the rules of that. You also had a lot of detainees claiming abuse because this was in the wake of Abu Ghraib, and that was used offensively against our guards. So our guards would have feces thrown at them, all this other stuff, and yet they would be charged with detainee abuse. So we had to evaluate all that. So what I learned from that, and I took to Iraq when I was working with SEAL Team 1, is they are using things like detainee abuse offensively against us. It was a tactic, technique, and procedure.
He's a sick guy, that guy. That Ron DeSantis. He's sick. He's sick in the head, that guy.
It sounds like he enjoyed it. He enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Well, so look, you put that interview together with this guy's story, and this is what happened. Ron DeSantis went and interviewed these guys and gave them the impression that he was going to advocate for them, and really, he was there to help out the administration and advise them on how to break this hunger strike and what they could do legally, what they could legally get away with. I want to read one more paragraph in this. You don't have to cue it up. I have it on my screen. Okay. At the time of DeSantis's speech, this is he's talking about a speech he gave in 2006. At the time, 80 prisoners remained at Guantanamo. I was one of them. Of the 779 men held at Guantanamo since it opened in 2002, only 12 have been charged with crimes. Only 2 have been convicted. So this really puts the lie to that interview. He's trying to make it sound like, well, Guantanamo was full of all these jihadists who were propagandizing their cause by pretending to be abused. Based on those numbers, the vast majority of these were innocent men trying to gain their freedom. Out of hundreds of detainees, you have two convictions. But the way he makes it sound, wow,
these were terrorists.
These were terrorists, right? Now, I'd like to tell you that Ron DeSantis is going to pay a political price for this, but he is not. He is not. I very much doubt he would pay a price for this running as a Democrat. Frankly, this is the same party where they ring a cowbell in your face if you suggest George Bush should go to prison. So, and certainly the media, as I just said, has shown a distinct lack of curiosity in this, given that they're in full pile on DeSantis mode. They love DeSantis stories as long as they're culture war stories. They really don't like this story because of who it implicates.
Yeah,
so
and these accusations have been out there for a while. These are not new. But what made it blow up this week a little bit is that clip of him kind of snapping back at the reporter went a little viral because, he abused the press, right? So they covered from that angle, that he yelled at a reporter. Not that he's a force-feeding, ass-to-mouth torturer.
Right, yeah. So this isn't gonna change his political trajectory, but it is useful to get some insight into who this person is. And I think sometimes, because I've for a while now been saying that I think he's going to be the president, some people misinterpret that as being supportive of Ron DeSantis, and that's certainly not the case. Ron DeSantis is a little fucking goon. Who my argument very often with DeSantis is the left is empowering people like this by taking such deeply unpopular cultural positions. You're handing this guy a surfboard that he can ride right into the White House on the wave of cultural backlash. That is why I argue so strongly against so many of those cultural positions, not because I like Ron DeSantis, because I don't like Ron DeSantis, and you're making him stronger. You're making him powerful. And you're making him, I believe, the next president.
Please clap.